Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe for more. Claims and reasoning. Using claims as conclusions and premises. We know that reasoning is, put simply, giving reasons for one's views. We reason, therefore, by linking claims together to form a text in which most of the linked claims provide a reason or reasons for accepting another claim, or linked claims explain why another claim can be made. For example, if I said Australia should become a republic, it would only be natural for you to ask why, which would prompt me to give you a reason that Australia's economic relationship with Asia would be strengthened if Australia declared its final independence from its European origins by becoming a republic. The claims that act as reasons are premises, and the claim that is being supported or explained is the conclusion. When reasoning, we will always be dealing with at least two claims, the claim we want people to accept and the claim we are using to support the first claim. Almost always there are a number of premises supporting one conclusion, but the minimum requirement is one premise and one conclusion. A fundamental skill in reasoning is to be able to identify, in our own and in others' work, those claims that are serving as premises to support the claim that is acting as a conclusion. Thus, we need to understand how claims can be used as conclusions and premises. To do so, we must remember that before we use them in reasoning, all premises and conclusions are the same thing, they are claims. There is nothing about a claim on its own that makes it a conclusion or a premise, until we decide, in our reasoning, that claim Z will be the conclusion and claims X and Y will be the premises. X, Y, and Z are all just claims. They only become premises and conclusion through the act of linking them together, as in, because of X and Y, my conclusion is Z. The difference between premises and conclusions is not dependent on any essential qualities of the claims, it is, instead, a functional difference. Whether a claim is a conclusion or a premise depends on the function that the claim performs in any particular argument or explanation. What determines that function is the relationship between one claim and another. Let us use the following claims to demonstrate this point. Your car is dirty. You drove the car through some mud. You should wash your car. And here are two very simple examples of the way we can use these claims in reasoning, with the claims marked as C, conclusion, or P, premise, to show how they perform different functions. Your car is dirty, C, because you drove through some mud, P. You should wash your car, C, since your car is dirty, P. The same claim, your car is dirty, is used in two different ways, first, as a conclusion being explained and, second, as a premise. The general rule, thus demonstrated, is that any claim can be either a conclusion or a premise depending on how it is linked with other claims and the context in which it is used. Conclusions and premises are very similar because both are claims. However, within reasoning, some claims serve a different purpose to other claims. The nature of premises and conclusions is not already laid down, magically, in the words we use to express them, but is something that we can actively control and alter. For example, we may read someone else's conclusion and then use it as a premise in our own reasoning. Or, we see that the premises of someone's argument need further explanation and, by using them as conclusions, proceed to give that explanation with our own premises. Exercise 2.7. Make up 4 short examples of reasoning using the following claims. Make sure that you practice using the same claim as the conclusion in one example and as a premise in another. The road is wet. You need to drive more carefully. You should pay attention to what you are doing. Verity has just come home soaking wet. There was a rainstorm a few minutes ago. More on conclusions. So, when we reason, we first of all have to decide which is the claim we are trying to argue for or explain. This claim is the conclusion. It is not a summary, but a new statement altogether, which may be linked to the premises but goes beyond them to give some further information, the truth of which becomes clearer because of the premises given. The conclusion is a claim in its own right, and not merely a restatement of the claims already made as premises. The selection of a conclusion is dependent on the purpose of our overall argument or explanation. First, we can use claims about the future as conclusions. These sorts of conclusions are required when we are making a prediction, as in the future, the world will be much warmer, c, because of the effects of industrial pollution, p. Predictions are always doubtful since the events they predict have not yet happened, and thus their truth can never be established except as a prediction. Hence they require supporting argument to make them acceptable. We can also use claims about the past or the present to establish what is the case. Often there are doubts about what has happened or is happening. For example, in a criminal investigation, an argument can be used to support our conclusions on these matters. Second, we can use as a conclusion any claim that makes an appeal for people, whether an individual or groups, to act in a certain manner, as in the argument that we should reduce the production of carbon monoxide, c, because this action will reduce the rate of global warming, p. Such arguments, the conclusions of which are appeals to action, are designed to convince people to do something. Sometimes the action required is for us to think differently, as in an argument that demands that you should not think highly of governments that are reluctant to stop global warming, c, since these governments are risking the future prosperity of all humanity, p. Conclusions such as those just discussed require arguments to convince audiences to accept them. In both cases, it is the conclusion that is in doubt. Remember that claims are statements that may or may not be true. But other conclusions, often about events happening in the past, are not in doubt but still involve reasoning that explains why the conclusion can be made. In the sentence, we now have a problem with global warming, c, because previous governments were blind to the consequences of industrial growth and technology, p. The conclusion reports that there is now a problem with global warming so that the premise can explain why this has happened. Some explanations can be characterized as justifications, as in, I decided to vote for the Greens at the last federal election, c, because I am very keen to see Australia's environment protected, p. In this example, the conclusion reports something that happened so that the writer can justify why they did it. Exercise 2.8. Try to work out what sort of conclusion is used in each of the following. Remember to think about the purpose that the conclusion is designed to fulfill. In each example, the conclusion is the second claim in the sentence. A. Since the bushfire threat is high in the next 3 months, we should improve our firefighting service. B. Since there has been no rain recently, I forecast that there will be a high bushfire threat this coming summer. C. Because the government failed to improve the fire services, the bushfires that occurred in 2001 were much harder to control than in previous years. D. The government has not done much to improve the firefighting service. Don't you think that it is inefficient? E. Because the budget deficit has required the government to make many cutbacks in spending, we have done little to increase available firefighting resources. Assume that a government representative is speaking. More on premises. While a basic outline of the different types of conclusions is relatively straightforward, there is no similar, straightforward approach for different types of premises. Virtually any claim you can think of can serve as a premise. Even claims that we might normally think of as conclusions can be premises. All that premises have to do is to be able to provide support for the conclusion, either in explaining it or arguing for it. Thus, premises tend in most cases to be initially more acceptable than the conclusion, though not always. See Strength of Support in Chapter 6. Furthermore, it is misleading to think about individual premise types. Instead, we should look at the way in which premises connect with one another. In short, premises function in 3 ways. They make a substantive point, i.e. report something, or provide some kind of evidence. They can define some term in the argument, or they can frame the other premises, demonstrating more clearly the relationship of all the other premises to the conclusion. See Chapter 4 for more details on how premises function. Review. Words combine to form statements, which in turn combine to form texts. No text can be understood outside its context of use and interpretation. The most important statements for us to consider are claims. When properly linked together, they form a text, which is either an argument or an explanation. Claims state, in language, the events, ideas, and things that make up our world, asserting that what they represent is true. Claims are the key elements from which we build our arguments and explanations. The analytical function of claims is, however, often obscured by their mode of expression. By understanding what claims are and what their properties are, we can better understand how to use claims as premises and conclusions in our reasoning. Claims have three significant properties. First, a claim always contains an internal connection between two or more components. One or both of these components can be a claim in its own right, but functioning differently, as an element within a claim. Second, claims always include some indication of scope and certainty, though often they are implied. Third, claims are either descriptive, what is, or are value judgments, what ought to be. Many claims appear to be descriptive but either contain implicit value judgments or become value-laden when read in combination with other claims. Claims are used as either premises or conclusions. The difference between them is determined by how we use them in any particular act of reasoning. Any claim can serve as a premise or conclusion. That said, we can see how conclusion claims must relate to the particular purposes of the reasoning, predicting, establishing, or appealing for action, and explaining or justifying. In the last case, the reasoning involves an explanation, whereas the other purposes require an argument. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe for more.